Perfect. All right. Yay, we're on. Hey guys, hey everybody, I'm back. All right, so it's study group time. Study group means that we are reading material from a book and discussing the material and questions that are connected to that. No personal readings, guys. So if you're tuning in, wanting a personal reading or wanting to ask me a personal question or a question about your loved ones in spirit, this is not the time for that. This is the study group. So that was in the last hour, okay? So we are currently on Conversations with God, and so that's the book that we're on right now. I'm on page 168 of the first book. And so for those of you who haven't been following along, the book is about a gentleman. His name is Neil Donald Walsh. And he is a guy who basically got to a point in his life where he was trying really hard to make it and to do and to just make something of his life and to be happy and content with things. And it wasn't working for him. And he wasn't able to achieve, and he wasn't able to get any happier. And he went from being in a really good place professionally and career-wise to he got into a car accident, broke his neck, and he was homeless for a few years, living in tents, eating out of garbage cans, all of that stuff. And this actually in Houston. He was in Houston and Dallas for a while doing this. And so then he got himself back to being able to support himself and to have a home again and to live in the bed, just be able to sleep in your bed. So he was able to get back to that, but he wasn't happy. He still wasn't happy. So he just had enough. And one day, after a really rough day, he just was like, what else is it going to take? Like, what more do I need to do in this world to be happy? So he started basically going off on God in his mind, and he started to just vent and vent and vent. And in the process of venting, it turned into a conversation in his mind between himself and this other conscious state, or this other conscious being, which we call God. So this is what the book is about. It's basically about him having a conversation with God in his own mind and writing everything down. And so this is a dialogue between the two of them. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of the books that really does put a lot of things into perspective, and it helps us to understand our relationship to everything in this world, our relationship to each other, why certain things happen to us, and so forth. So there's a lot of wisdom in the book. It went on to become a bestseller, and it's been translated into a few hundred different languages, and it has definitely been one of the best books spiritually that I believe has ever been created. So not the best, but one of the. I mean, if you were to give me this book and the Bible, I would pick this book because it's like straight, simple, to the point. You know, the other book is just convoluted and so challenging for people to grasp all of the information, and it's also very contradictory to itself. So in my mind, I'm like, I like this because it's simple to the point and it gets to it, versus me trying to figure things out. I can figure things out as long as I have the pieces necessary to figure it out. But if you're going to put out a book that is supposed to give people wisdom and guidance and help them to understand this world, then make it simple for them to understand. Don't like hide it behind a rock, so that's just the way that I feel about stuff. But anyways, what we're doing is our study group. So if anyone is tuning in and they want a reading, unfortunately, guys, that was in the last hour. So this is just study group and talking about these things. But if you would like to ask me about the material or want to talk about spiritual ideas and spiritual philosophy, I'm happy to talk about that, and you can put that in the comments section below. So in the book, Terry, it's called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. There's actually a film that came out. The film is just his story, like how he went from being in a relationship, having kids, to being in an accident, losing everything, being homeless, having a broken neck, almost dying, living homeless for several years, and then getting back to just being able to take care of himself and having a home and having a bed, etc. So that's what the movie is about. The book itself hasn't been made into a movie, and I don't think they ever will, because this is like hardcore heavy reading to like get through all this stuff. There's too much in the book that you could put in a movie, so you would have to read the book. Which is why I'm reading it, because a lot of people won't read books nowadays. People don't want to pick up a book and have to read it. And so sometimes just picking up a book and reading and sitting with that information and just thinking about it, can help you make sense of a lot of things in life that you may not have understood before. And most people, it's work, but you can't change your life. You can't experience happiness. You can't shift the trajectory of things unless you actually decide to change. And you either change within or you change without. And changing without is the easiest way to change. Changing within takes a lot more effort and a lot more work. So that's what I'm focused on, is I'm helping you to change within, and then I'm going to tell you what you can do to change without, so that you can have a double whammy there, and you can get it all knocked out, right? Because you can change. You can totally change the trajectory of things. Okay, so last we left off, and then let me go through here before it gets started. I'm listening to the dialogues for the second time on Audible. I know, I love listening. I love the Audible versions because they have the different voices. Because in what I do is when I'm reading Neil's part, I'll say Neil and then I'll read as him. Then when I'm reading God's part, I'll say God and then I'll read as God. The Audible, I love the Audible, and because when you listen to it, Neil, it's actually Neil Donald Walsh reading his part, but then the part of God is read by two people, by an old man, like what people would think God should sound like, and then by a wise female who is like the epitome of like that nurturing energy. And I love the way that they express themselves with the Audible one. So yeah, I love it. All right, so let's get to it. So getting to here, actually, let me go here, see what you guys want to say before we get started about this. And I just got back from my walk, guys, so I'm like a little like misty. I'm misty. Perfect. Good there. All right, and then there's that. Cool. Okay, let's get started. So we are where we are. Okay, so let me go back for a second because I want to make sure I'm in a good place. Okay, here we go. So Neil. Well, far be it from me to become annoyed with God. I mean, that would be a bit presumptuous, wouldn't it? But I do think we can carry all this a bit too far. My father taught me all things in moderation. I think I've stuck to that where alcohol is concerned. And so they're having a conversation about the consumption of alcohol. And God has pretty much said, you can drink alcohol, you can live your life the way you choose, but the body wasn't designed to have alcohol in it. And that's and it's an observation. It's not like you can't do it, but it's not designed for it. And it's more of like just making it a better effect. So that's what Neil was saying, like everything in moderation. God, the body can more easily recover from only moderate abuse. The saying is therefore useful. Nevertheless, I'll stick to my original statement. The body was not meant to intake alcohol. Neil, but even some medicines contain alcohol. God, I have no control over what you call medicine. I'll stay with my statement. Neil, you really are rigid, aren't you? God, look, truth is truth. Now, if someone said a little alcohol won't hurt you and placed that statement in the context of life as you now live it, I would have to agree with them. That does not change the truth of what I've said. It simply allows you to ignore it. Yet consider this. Currently, you humans wear your bodies out, typically within 50 to 80 years. Some last longer, but not many. Some stop functioning sooner, but not the majority. Can we agree on that? Neil, yes, okay. God, all right. So we have a good starting point for discussion. Now, when I said I could agree with the statement, a little alcohol won't hurt you, I qualified that by adding in the context of life as you now live it. You see, you people seem satisfied with life as you now live it. But life, it may surprise you to learn, was meant to be lived a whole different way. And your body was designed to last a great deal longer. Neil, it was? God, yes. Neil, how much longer? God, infinitely longer. Neil, what does that mean? God, it means, my son, your body was designed to last forever. God, Neil, forever? God, yes, read that, forevermore. Neil, you mean we are never supposed to die? God, you never do die. Life is eternal. You are immortal. You never do die. You simply change form. You didn't even have to do that. You decided to do that. I didn't. I made you bodies that would last forever. Do you really think that the best God could do, the best I could come up with, was a body that could make it 60, 70, maybe 80 years before falling apart? Is that, do you imagine, the limit of my ability? Neil, I never thought of putting it that way exactly. God, I designed your magnificent body to last forever. And the earliest of you did live in the body virtually pain-free and without fear of what you now call death. In your religious mythology, you symbolize your cellular memory of these first version humans by calling them Adam and Eve. Actually, of course, there were more than two. At the outset, the idea was for you wonderful souls to have a chance to know yourselves as who you really are through experiences gained in the physical body. In the relative world, as I have explained repeatedly here, this was done through the slowing of the This was done through the slowing down of the unfathomable speed of all vibration, thought form to produce matter, including that matter you call the physical body. Life evolved through a series of steps in the blink of an eye that you now call billions of years. And in this holy instant came you, out of the sea, the water of life, onto the land and onto the form you now hold. Neil, then the evolutionists are right. God, I find it amusing, a source of continual amusement, actually, that you humans have such a need to break everything down into right and wrong. It never occurs to you that you've made those labels up to help you define the material and yourself. It never occurs to you, except to the finest minds among you, that a thing could be both right and wrong, that only in the relative world are things one or the other. In the world of the absolute, of time, no time, all things are everything. There is no male and female. There is no before and after. There is no fast and slow. Here and there, up and down, left and right, and no right or wrong. Your astronauts and cosmonauts have gained a sense of this. They imagine themselves to be rocketing upward to get to outer space, only to find when they got there that they were looking up at the earth. Or were they? Maybe they were looking down at the earth. But then where was the sun? Up, down, no, over there, to the left. So now suddenly a thing was neither up nor down. It was sideways, and all definitions thus disappeared. So it is in my world, our real realm, all definitions, let me repeat that. So it is in my world, our real realm. All definitions disappear, rendering it difficult to even talk about this realm in definitive terms. Religion is your attempt to speak of the unspeakable. It does not do a very good job. No, my son, the evolutionists are not right. I created all of this in the blink of an eye, in one holy instant, just as the creationists have said. And it came about through a process of evolution, taking billions and billions of what you call years, just as the evolutionists claim. They are both right, as the cosmonauts discovered. It all depends on how you look at it. But the real question is, one holy instant, billions of years, what's the difference? Can you simply agree that on some of the questions of life, the mystery is too great for even you to solve? Why not hold the mystery as sacred? Why not allow the sacred to be sacred and leave it alone? Neil, I suppose we all have an insatiable need to know. God, but you already know. I've just told you. Yet you don't want to know the truth. You want to know the truth as you understand it. This is the greatest barrier to your enlightenment. You think you already know the truth. You think you already understand how it is. So you agree with everything you see or hear or read that falls into the paradigm of your understanding, and reject everything which does not. And this you call learning. This you call being open to the teachings. Alas, you can never be open to the teachings so long as you are closed to everything save your own truth. Thus will this very book be called blasphemy, the work of the devil by some. Yet those who have ears to hear, let them listen. I tell you this, you were not meant to ever die. Your physical form was created as a magnificent convenience, a wonderful tool, a glorious vehicle allowing you to experience the reality you have created with your mind, that you may know the self you have created in your soul. The soul conceives, the mind creates, the body experiences. The circle is complete. The soul then knows itself in its own experience. If it does not like what it is experiencing, feeling, or wishes a different experience for any reason, it simply conceives of a new experience of self and quite literally changes its mind. Soon the body finds itself in a new experience. I am the resurrection and the life was a magnificent example of this. How do you think Jesus did it anyway? Or do you not believe it ever happened? Believe it, it happened. Yet this much is so. The soul will never override the body or the mind. I made you as a 3-in-1 being. You are 3 beings in one, made in the image and likeness of me. The 3 aspects of self are in no wise unequal to each other. Each has a function, but no function is greater than another, nor does any function actually precede another. All are interrelated in an exactly equal way. Conceive, create, experience. What you conceive, you create. What you create, you experience. What you experience, you conceive. That is why it is said, if you can cause your body to experience something, take abundance for example, you will soon have the feeling of it in your soul. You will conceive of it in a new way, namely abundant, thus presenting your mind with a new thought about that. From the new thought springs more experience, and the body begins living a new reality as a permanent state of being. Your body, your mind, your soul, spirit are one. In this, you are a microcosm of me, the divine all, the holy everything, the sum and substance. You see now how I am the beginning and the end of everything, the Alpha and the Omega. Now I will explain to you the ultimate mystery, your exact and true relationship to me. You are my body. As your body is to your mind and soul, so too are you to my mind and soul. Therefore, everything I experience through you. Just as your body, mind, and spirit are one, so too are mine. So it is that Jesus of Nazareth, among the many who understood this mystery, spoke immutable truth when he said, I and the Father are one. Now I will tell you, there are even larger truths than this to which you will one day become privy. For even as you are the body of me, I am the body of another. Neil, you mean you are not God? God. Yes, I am God, as you now understand him. I am Goddess, as you now comprehend her. I am the conceiver and the creator of everything you now know and experience. And you are my children, even as I am the child of another. Neil, are you trying to tell me that even God has a God? God, I am telling you that your perception of ultimate reality is more limited than you thought, and that truth is more unlimited than you can imagine. I am giving you ever so small a glimpse of infinity, an infinite love, a much larger glimpse, and you could not hold it in your reality. You can barely hold this. Neil, wait a minute. You mean I'm really not talking with God here? God, I have told you, if you conceive of God as your creator and master, even as you are the creator and master of your own body, I am the God of your understanding, and you are talking to me. Yes, it has been a delicious conversation, no? Neil, delicious or not, I thought I was talking with the real God. the God of gods, you know, the top guy, the chief honcho. God, you are. Believe me, you are. Neil, and yet you say that there is someone above you in this hierarchical scheme of things? God, we are now trying to do the impossible, which is to speak of the unspeakable. As I said, that is what religion seeks to do. Let me see if I can find a way to summarize this. Forever is longer than you know. Eternal is longer than forever. God is more than you can imagine. God is the energy you call imagination. God is creation. God is first thought. And God is last experience. And God is everything in between. Have you ever looked down a high-powered microscope or seen pictures or movies of molecular action and said, good heavens, there's a whole universe down there. And to that universe, I, the now present observer, must feel like God. Have you ever said that or had that kind of experience? Neil: yes, I should imagine every thinking person has. God: indeed, you have given yourself your own glimpse of what I am showing you here. And what would you do if I told you that this reality of which you have given yourself a glimpse never ends? Neil: explain that. I'd ask you to explain that. God: take the smallest part of the universe you can imagine. Imagine this tiny, tiny particle of matter. Neil: okay. God: now cut that in half. Neil: okay. God: what have you got? Neil: two smaller halves. God: precisely. Now cut those in half. What now? Neil: two smaller halves. Right. Now again and again. What's left? Neil: smaller and smarter particles. God: yes, but when does it stop? How many times can you divide matter until it ceases to exist? Neil: I don't know. I guess it never ceases to exist. God: you mean you can never completely destroy it? All you can do is change its form? Neil: it would seem so. God: I tell you this. You have just learned the secret of all of life and seen into infinity. Now I have a question to ask you. Neil: okay. God: what makes you think infinity goes only one way? Neil: so there is no end going up any more than there is going down? God: there is no end, there is no up or down, but I understand your meaning. Neil: but if there is no end to smallness, that means there is no end to bigness. God: correct. Neil: but if there is no end to bigness, then there is no biggest. That means in the largest sense, there is no God. God: or perhaps all of it is God, and there is nothing else. I tell you this, I am that I am. And you are that you are. You cannot not be. You can change form all you wish, but you cannot fail to be. Yet you can fail to know who you are, and in this failing, experience only half of it. And in this failing, experience only the half of it. Neil: that would be hell. God: exactly. Yet you are now condemned to it. You are not relegated to it forevermore. All that it takes to get out of hell, to get out of not knowing, is to know again. There are many ways and many places, dimensions in which you can do this. You are in one of those dimensions now. It is called, in your understanding, the third dimension. Neil: and there are many more? God: have I not told you that in my kingdom there are many, many dimensions? Have I not told you that in my kingdom there are many mansions? I would not have told it to you were it not so. Neil: then there is no hell? Not really? I mean, there is no place or dimension to which you are everlastingly condemned? God: what would be the purpose of that? Yet you are always limited by your knowingness. For you, we are a self-centered being. You cannot be what you do not know yourself to be. That is why you have been given this life, so that you might know yourself in your own experience. Then you can conceive of yourself as who you really are and create yourself as that in your experience. And the circle is again complete, only bigger. And so you are in the process of growing, or as I have put it throughout this book, of becoming. There is no limit to what you can become. Neil, you mean I can even become, dare I say it, a god just like you? God, what do you think? Neil, I don't know. God, until you do, you cannot. Remember the triangle, the Holy Trinity, spirit, mind, body. Conceive, create, experience. Remember using your symbology. Holy Spirit equals inspiration equals conceive. Father equals parenting equals create. Son equals offspring equals experience. Holy Spirit, Father and Son. Inspiration, parenting, and offspring. Conceive, create, and experience. The Son experiences the creation of the fathering thought, which is conceived of by the Holy Ghost. Can you conceive of yourself as one day being a God? Neil, in my wildest moments. God, good, for I tell you this, you are already a God. You simply do not know it. Have I not said, ye are gods? And then we'll stop there, because that's the end of the chapter. All right, what do y'all think about that? What do you think about the idea of there being infinite? And by the way, this is what I've been told as well by Aja. When I've had those conversations with Aja, this is the way that it's been explained to me as well. This is actually the reason why I was able to understand the concept of the ever-expanding soul, because the ever-expanding soul, or the branch experience, is representative of the God experience. And so you have this being that broke itself up into different opportunities of experience, which is infinite in its being. And then those pieces broke itself off into infinite experiences, and that's in play. And so, for example, I'm, Ferny, but my soul, Aja, is the bridge point between me and God, and then there's God. So we got God, which split itself up into infinite pieces to experience things from every single vantage point, to know itself and to be itself. And then each one of those pieces broke itself up into infinite forms to experience in a multitude of ways. My soul being is one of them. Aja is one of them. We all have souls, and not all people. It's not just like one to one to one. It's like one to infinite, and then you pick one out of the infinite, and then that branches out again. So think of it that way. So when I talked, this is what I talked about last time when I talked about past lives, and the idea that we don't just have past lives or future lives, we have infinite lives. We have infinite branches of perspective and infinite realities of experience. So this is why I've had past lives that happened in different periods of time. But then when we got closer to this current time, I had various lifetimes that were actually happening simultaneously. And so this is why I have one lifetime where I was this dictator who was known as like the compassionate dictator in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then around the same time, there was a person whose lifetime I remember being on the Titanic as a stewardess in the second class. And then there has been another so there's all these different lifetimes that you experience, and some of them can happen simultaneously. So our soul is not limited to just one lifetime in one moment. It can have multitudes. So when you think of the idea of like a soulmate, because people are obsessed with the idea of a soulmate, they believe that there's like another half of them, and there's only like them and then a half of them. You're not a half a person walking around. You're a full embodiment of what you're meant to be. You're not half of anything. But when people encounter a soulmate, which is not a common thing to experience, it's a rarity, you're actually encountering another aspect of your own soul, meaning that if my soul produced me, and then my soul also produced an additional personality in the same time frame, we both are connected to the same soul. It's like the cloud, but we both are individuals. We're both very separate. But when we connect with each other, because we're tied into that same soul, we would feel this immense need to be connected. This is why, though, it is rare, because a lot of people, if people were able to have a soulmate in their life, they would never leave each other. They would literally be attached all the time, because that level of connection to that part of yourself is really hard to break and is not easy to just want to be separate from. So, for example, some of us have that same connection with our pets. Even though I have 3 cats, I have Indiara, I have Chanel, and I have Mama Cat. Chanel and Indiara, I love them to death, but I don't have the level of connection that I have with my Mama Cat, because I authentically believe she is a part of my own soul. So we share the same soul, but she's just a figment or a fraction of the energy that's necessary to exist in her form. My energy is created. I'm trying to get my words out. Is created by much more complex patterns, but we're part of the same soul. So you can have a soulmate that's an animal, which is why some people have such a bond with their animals. You can have a soulmate who's a mother or a child or a lover. It doesn't have to be someone in a romantic relationship. You can have a soulmate who is just someone that is part of the same soul. So usually sometimes when you're dealing with twins, identical twins, they usually represent the same soul in some instances. Even if they're different with each other, it's the same soul, same thing, soulmates. So that's why you encounter that. That's why it's so hard sometimes when an identical twin passes away, because they tend to do a lot together, and it's hard to exist without the other. So they're literally attached all the time. So that's what the idea of the soulmate is. But that's what's being spoken about here, is this infinite expression of God in form, and infinite. It's like never ends. It can get like completely. It can get very complex and complicated in your mind if you sit there and try to think about it all. And so I've come to accept that in this body I am limited by what I can comprehend and experience and gain through my unique opportunities of experience, but I still push myself to my limit. I still try to learn and know as much as I can, because who doesn't want to know everything? Who doesn't want to know all the secrets of the universe? I want to know as much as I can. And I'm like, okay, look, I may have a bird brain in this body, but I can fly, and so I can see a lot from that vantage point. So I'm just going to fly from a spiritual perspective. I'm just going to fly from a human perspective and try to get as much as I can, so I'm not stuck on the ground, right? So that's my thing. So let me see what you guys are asking about this, because it's so fascinating stuff. I love this book. Love it. All right, so that's those are personal questions. Okay, so those are personal questions. So remember, all the questions that I'm only answering during this live have to do with the content or the material of the book. So it's either that or spiritual based questions. Okay. All right. Let's see. Go through here. See what y'all been saying. What are y'all saying? Let's go through here. Okay. Too many. Okay, there we go. Just wanted to say, I know now the name you were trying to tell me earlier. Oh, perfect. Good. Well, see, I'm glad. Yeah. People watching, Mickey, people watching, whenever they're watching the lives, if they see me say something and the person says no, they automatically assume that I'm wrong or that I didn't get it. I never assume that. I'm like, nope, I've been doing this long enough that I've run into enough people who come back and say, holy crap, I didn't realize this was the case or this was the situation. And then I ask my mom or whatever, and now I know what you're talking about. And in the moment when you're on camera and you know people are watching you, it's not a comfortable experience sometimes unless you're used to it. It's taken me years to get to this level of practice to just be comfortable in front of people. So, thank you, Lizzie. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's go going through here. Ferny, do you know anything about lifetimes during biblical times such as Moses? Yeah, it's a good question that you asked me that. I'm pretty sure I had a lifetime during the 1st century. AD or CE, you can say CE. AD is the other way of doing it. I'm pretty sure I was around that time, because first of all, I'm fascinated by that time frame. But it was a crazy ass time to be alive, because people were dying left and right. And I'm like, how can you even feel stable knowing that, in 2 years, that entire city is going to get wiped out, and you may have to like go off in some other territory. So there's a lot going on in the first century CE, and I feel confident that I've had a lifetime during that period. I just don't know who I was. I don't remember that yet. Every time I read something, it's almost like it opens up a memory or it reawakens something. And sometimes that's why I love to read so much, because there are things when I'm reading something and someone has an opinion who's a historian, but it's almost like I remember something differently. And so it's almost like they're giving me their opinion as far as how they understand it from the historical context, but it almost feels like some of those details aren't exactly accurate because it feels like I know it to be different, and it feels like it's a memory. So some of these books are reawakening memories within myself. I just don't know who I was during that time frame. But yeah, I the idea of like being around and Moses was, that was what the 5th century BCE. So I think, was it the 5th century? I haven't done enough research with the Moses period yet. I've done some, but most of my research has been around the 1st century CE because I'm like obsessed with that area, that time frame. See. Yeah, and guys, I know people are like answering people's questions about the books and stuff, something like that. I've been working on like changing the layout here, because right here there would be like a little like line, and then I would be like right here, and then down here it would have all the information so people can like see it, and it would tell people who are coming in who don't know what the hell's going on, like, why is he reading the books? Why is he not reading for us? Why is he not doing it? You know, that way they don't come in, they're like all caught off guard, not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. So Cassidy, universe and a universe and a universe and a universe. Yes. This has been the thing. You know, if you pay attention, you don't have to be a scientist to know that cycles repeat, patterns repeat. And if you pay attention to the largest structures that we are aware of and the smallest structures that we are aware of, you see repeating patterns. You see repeating ideas. You see repeating trends, because the universe is formulated to operate on patterns and on concepts and ideas that are working, that work, that function, that allow it to do what it needs to do. So the whole creation, the idea of creation, if you look at creation, it's a repeating pattern. All it is a repeating pattern. And so when you start to pay attention to the idea, when you accept that and you understand that everything's a repeating pattern in some way or another, you actually start to notice things and you get better. And this is a psychic trick, y'all, which will be in my book coming out in August. I think I set a date now, which is August. So, but there's a repeating pattern to everything. So sometimes when I'm sensing the future and I'm trending things, it's all based on energy, the formulation of energy, these pieces coming together. And then if I see these pieces coming together, it's almost like with a meteorologist, when you have all these pieces that you're looking at, okay, look at the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. Where's the front at? When you look at all these things, you can pretty much predict what's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that it's set in stone, but it's a high likelihood. That's all I'm doing. All I'm doing is trending the future, except because I paid enough attention when I've experienced things, when I've gone through things, etc. And also when I'm tuning in and focusing in on energy, my brain is not telling me something that is completely made up and new. My brain is simply recognizing patterns and giving me an understanding of what the trend is. That's all it's doing. But it's just really good at it, and it's a lot better at it than just a traditional guesser. So there's a lot of that I've gotten good at forcing my brain to do, and we all do that. We all can do that. We just don't realize it because we haven't been taught properly how to do it. So that's what the book's going to be about, teaching you how to pattern and see the future and sense things and so forth. Cassidy's like, I was manifesting using the stock market this past year, and yesterday was wondering what you would say, and you answer in the second I tune into your last live. Thank you, Spirit. Yeah, I've before, when I used to do manifestational work, you know, when you first learn about The Secret, when you first hear about the idea of being able to create your future and manifest your future, the first thing you want to do is you want to control what's going to happen, because that's what we're used to. We're used to controlling everything, right? So you want to control what you want to manifest. You want to control things. So immediately you want to just start to tell the universe how you want everything to be. You dismiss the idea that the universe might be smarter than you, or might have things better set up for you. And so when I first learned about manifesting and, focusing on, creating the future, bringing about synchronicities and all that, I was focused on trying to create and control the future as I wanted it to be. As time has progressed, and as I did that, so there was like a long ass list, and everything on that list, like pretty much damn well created. I manifested. There's one thing left that never got manifested, but that's okay. I don't need it to manifest. I'm okay. But everything I wanted, I manifested. And when you get good at manifesting and you get good at summoning forth that which you desire, what I've realized along the way is that some of these things were already going to happen. I didn't actually desire it. The desire within me was a natural tendency. It was a natural programming within. So when you think of it this way, when you look at an animal, let's say a cat, and the cat has babies out in the wild, it is programmed. It's not like it's there as a baby learning how to take care of its children. It only has the experience of being taken care of. But as soon as a cat gets pregnant and then has its litter, its kittens, it automatically knows what to do, because it's instinct. It is a summoning within it to come forth and align with what is being summoned, what is being called to do. There's an energy there, and you can call it instinct, you can call it DNA. I call it alignment. I call it synchronicity. It is doing what it's meant to do. We as souls in form, there is a natural structure and pattern to each of us. And there's a natural flow that our life is meant to progress along, to go along. And that flow is a mixture of experiences and of both positive and negative things, both love and joy, and also fear and suffering. It's a mixture of these things, but there's a pattern that is programmed. There's a pattern that's meant to occur. So by default, we're going to begin to be summoned and pulled in that direction. We don't have a choice. We are going to be pulled in that direction. And it's almost like salmon that swim back every year, knowing that they're going to die at the end, but they still do it anyways. It's part of the nature of their being. So part of the nature of our being is to experience a human life and have very unique experiences of perspective throughout our life. That includes both love and fear, joy and suffering. It's a combination of things. And some people have been able to break these patterns and these trends down through astrology, through Vedic astrology. Some people have been able to break that down because there are patterns to all these things. And all it is just helping us understand the patterns, So when I think of like meteorologists and the weather reports and that science, meteorology, I think of the same thing as like Vedic astrologers and people who study the flow and the natural rhythmic cycles of things based on some of these elements. It's the same process. So there's a pattern that we are meant to go with. As we begin to have experiences, the experiences that we have with people in situations and scenarios, within all of that, all the ingredients that we need to align with the pattern are all within those experiences. What tends to happen is we begin to question our place in this world. We begin to question who we are and what we are here to do. And there's nothing wrong with questioning. There's nothing wrong with wondering or desiring to know. The problem is when you fall into the trap of believing that you're broken. That is the biggest issue that people run into. They run into the trap, and at some point they had an experience that was so compelling that they fell into the idea and belief that they're broken, and that they don't belong here, and that they don't they don't have a place here. And you can have that through various ways. For myself, I was born out of wedlock, so I didn't have a father. So already there's a experience that was very effective and making me feel rejected and making me feel unloved, unworthy. And so that's one. And then as I got older and began to evolve as a boy, as a gay child, and I began to be drawn to being attracted to males, that was another thing that I experienced that was very effective at telling me that I was broken and not normal. And so these are experiences that we go through. And then I was molested, and then I was sexually abused and physically abused. So you add all these things in, every single one of those experiences is an opportunity to either accept what you're being given as truth, or remember who you are and reject what has been presented. And most people don't remember who they are and choose that and reject what's been presented. Most people embrace what they've been fed. And so then you begin to become conditioned by the state of fear, by the state of rejection, by the state of unworthiness. And so you have all of these people who have bought in to the greatest lies of this reality, which is that they have no place here. They don't belong here. They're broken. They're not worthy of love, and they don't deserve good things or to experience love or to be connected. So all of these experiences, and a lot of people buy into it, accept it, and it becomes who they are. They fall out of sync. They fall out of sync with the summoning path, and they become conflicted within themselves. And this is when you start to have people who feel lost, who don't know who they are anymore, who don't know what they're supposed to do here, who don't have a solid faith in God, who can only regurgitate what they're told, but don't actually understand the information. This is when you start to have these defective ways of experiencing this reality. And these defective ways of experiencing these realities, they will still teach you something. You're still going to learn there. Every single experience immediately gets fed back into the God cloud, and then a new desire appears. A new soul emerges to fulfill that understanding and desire. But most people are stuck in all of that. And so there's that muck. There's that mud that they're stuck in. And you can call that a living hell, because it is what it is. And the deeper you go down that rabbit hole, the more painful it becomes, the more you suffer, and the more of a hell you will experience. So we are responsible for our own hell, as we are responsible for our own heaven. This is the thing that switches it all. This is the thing that changes that for you. This is what I had to go through. I had to turn away from the things that I bought into. And it started with my religion, because I was raised a Catholic, and I bought into the mindset and the idealism and the perspective of a Hispanic Catholic in this world. So I bought into that. I was conditioned by that. I accepted it until I decided I wasn't going to accept it. And the moment that I decided I wasn't going to accept it is when, and it all came down to one conversation I had with a cousin of mine, where we used to go walking around the park every day, and I looked up to her. She was one of my closest cousins. She still is. I love her to death. She's just been such an amazing person for me and teacher. And I had been reading a lot about spirituality and the idea of sexuality, and I was trying to understand who I was in all this. Because if I go based off of my religion, I am an evil person. I am not worthy of light or of love, and I deserve to suffer for all eternity. Just based on the idea of who I am in this world as a gay man. And I could not accept that. And that was the thing. I couldn't accept it. I couldn't accept it because I know I'm not an evil person. I know I'm a kind person, and I know that I'm a good person to people, and I'm very considerate and compassionate and loving. So it could not be true. It could not be true what they say. So if that's not true, then I had to choose to accept what I knew within myself and what I remembered being source in form, being God as human. I had to remember that part of myself, and I had to turn my back, which did not serve me and did not align to that truth. And so I stepped away from it and I began to look for my own answers. And I asked God to reveal those truths to me. And I allowed myself to receive those truths. And in the process of allowing myself, I had to accept some things about myself. I had to accept that I am good. I had to accept that I am from light and from God. I had to accept that I deserve love. I had to accept that I deserve to be treated well. I had to accept a lot of things in order for me to accept this core belief in my mind, in my being, that went against the nature of what I was taught to believe and conditioned to believe. The moment that I did that is the moment that everything started to shift in my life. It didn't happen overnight, but there was a process and I began to change as a person. Now in hindsight, now who I am today, I'm like, oh my God, like what the hell was I thinking? I was essentially getting in my own way and I was causing myself more suffering in this world than I needed to experience, that I needed to go through. So now that I've accepted these truths about myself, as you should, now there is a summoning that is very natural. It's subtle. There's a subtle feeling. There's a subtle form that you're called into being. And sometimes it's intense and it gets louder because you have to act quickly and swiftly. Sometimes it's just a gentle pull. And so I listen to this pull. And it is presented to me, not just within myself in my own mind and the way I feel, it is presented to me through the synchronicities. Because what? I am in sync again. I am in sync with the summoned path. I am in sync with what I am meant to be. And so because I am in sync, I experience and witness all of the synchronicities, all of the reminders that this is who I am who I am, and what I am doing, what I'm experiencing, what I'm witnessing is what should be. So when you learn these things and you come to understand that, the idea of wanting to control the future, to create a reality of your choosing, to dominate creation and tell it what to do instead of you just go along for the ride, there's a flip that happens and you no longer try to make anything happen. You just show up. And that's all I do. I just show up. And I show up in a million ways, I can tell you. I show up if I am having a human experience and that experience can give another human being the opportunity to recover or to ascend from the descended state of hell that they're in. If just me sharing a human experience, even if it's not a comfortable one to share because I have to be vulnerable, I have to put myself out there in a way that puts all my dirty laundry out there, then so fucking be it, because that is what I'm summoned to do in this moment. And so this is why I'm very willing to be very vocal and be very public about things that people in my circles and in my industry are like, what is he doing? Why is he talking? Why is he being that way? Or why is he expressing himself this way? Or why is he sharing that, and so forth. Everything that my friend Sandra Logan told me not to do, I've done it. And it's been very liberating for me. And guess what? People are being helped by me just showing up and being who I need to be in this world. So that's the summoning forth. And when you begin to go along for the ride and you stop trying to tell the universe how things should be, you actually get a lot more easily and a lot more comes along for you than you realized you could do on your own. Because at this point, you're not just trying to force a change and manifestation in a reality. You have the same faith as a mustard seed. A mustard seed doesn't have to think and focus on manifesting itself. They don't think about the bills. They don't think about this. They don't think about that. They just go for it. They go along with it. And I've been able to get myself to a place where I'm able to do that every day. And I can wake up and decide what I feel the need to do. So if I don't feel like doing something and I'm procrastinating, I don't see it as procrastinating. As being procrastinating. I see it as I'm not been summoned to do this yet. It's there, I'm aware of it, but I'm not summoned to complete this or to do this yet. So I just will wait, and I wait until I feel that sudden tug and pull. And when I do it, people always say like, your timing is impeccable. You have like perfect timing. And I was just talking about you to, and it happens all the time because you're allowing yourself to be in sync with the universe, with God, with source, with the creation. So hope that explains the idea of like manifesting in the future and all that stuff. What does it mean what does it mean if you are too emotional? Is it part of the soul trait or your physical form? So, I mean, that depends on what you think too emotional is. I believe too emotional is if you've lost complete control. I mean, there's a reason for everything. Like right now, Roxy is going through an entire experience. Roxy, my assistant, she's going through an entire experience and this has been interesting. In some ways, it's been heartbreaking to see her having to go through this experience because someone that I know who's very strong, who's always been very solid for me in my life. I mean, she was one of my supervisors when I was a store manager at Starbucks for many years. I trusted her with depositing thousands of dollars at the bank. I mean, she has been this solid person in my life. And so as my assistant in my business for several years now, she's been very solid and I can depend on her. And I've rarely ever had to, correct her or get on her about anything because she's been pretty good at keeping up with stuff. Every now and then you may need a little kick in the butt, but that's with any job, right? But, to see her go from this very solid state of being to this very unhinged personality who doesn't have complete control of their faculties, that's been a hard thing for me to observe. But on the opposite side, I've learned a lot about myself in all of this as well, because hearing her speak about things, it sounds exactly like how I speak, except what's the difference? It's like she's speaking about certain things and experiencing certain things. I can say the same thing and people will believe me because it's coming from me. But when it comes from someone who has not been this person and it's obvious, it's not consistent, it's not clicking and matching up sometimes, something is different. And so what I've learned, and this is something that I tried to understand with my mom as well, because my mother is schizophrenic. And I've always told people when you're born a psychic or you're born a sensitive like myself, you're on the fence of being crazy. Like you literally are on the fence of being crazy. It won't take very much for you to go over that other edge, that other side of the fence. So it has to be a fine line that you have to learn to maintain and balance. And if not, then you'll end up on the crazy side and you'll lose control of your abilities and your way of connecting properly with the energy. And so one thing that I've noticed with myself and Roxy is that as she's been going through this whole process, her controls are not there. So, for example, I have an altered experience or an altered state of mind. And sometimes I may have that through meditation. Sometimes I have that when I'm going for my walk. I will have that in my dreams. I will have that just sitting, pondering things, and then writing them down. If I vape or if I do an edible, I will have an altered state of perception. But in that state, I'm still aware that I am myself having an altered state of perception. And there's a level of control that I have within that state. So when I'm sensing something, when I'm experiencing something, I will take that information and I will examine it and try to understand it and try to make sense of it. I never assume that it's 100% reality. I never assume that it's everything. I never assume this or that. I just take it and I sit with it and I let it be. And in that, I understand it better and I'm better able to make more sense of that. So when you see me posting like my predictions online, when you see me posting things from a spiritual context or from a spiritual perspective, it is something that I've experienced from an altered state, but I've grasped it, I've understood it, and I can relate back to it with an experience in my life that helps me to break it down for people who have never experienced that before. With Roxy, what I've noticed is that she is also having these altered states and her consciousness is shifting around. But there is no control mechanism that's there. And so even though I can pull myself back or keep myself from hurting another person or acting out or responding or reacting, even though I have those controls built in, that's part of my mind chemistry. My mother did not have those controls. And so she lost any ability to have an effect on using her ability. So she's still psychic. She has psychic experiences. She doesn't have the capacity to use it because it's almost like a car that you have that will get you someplace, but you no longer have brakes. You have no way of stopping yourself from hurting yourself or others. And at least in my current state, I have that control I have those controls built in, so I can stop myself before I do harm to others or harm myself. Right now, with what she's going through and what's happening, is there's those same mechanisms of sensing and having that consciousness in that altered state, but the controls are not there. They're not present because they've been impacted and affected by her experience with COVID, because it altered her brain's mechanisms and it affected her this way. So those controls aren't there. So if she has a thought about doing something, and she's just going to do it, even without thinking how it can affect another person or how it could come across her. There's no way of slowing down the vehicle or even stopping if you need to. She's literally like full speed ahead with no mechanism to stop. And that can get difficult and challenging. And that's where you jumped over the fence. And so learning to have control, learning to understand your abilities and not allowing yourself to completely be run by them is a process, and it takes years. This is why I tell people, and why I even wrote an article, that a lot of people in this industry who do what I do are fucking crazy. Not because they're wrong in what they can do or because they can't do the same things I can do, but because they don't have the controls built in, and they've completely fallen into being overwhelmed by the experiences and the energy exchanges. They're not rooted, and there's no anchor for them in this reality that we are used to. There's no anchor for them. And so they're literally like just going with it. And so many times you'll encounter people who are spiritually minded people who are very, very good at what they can do. They're batshit crazy because they don't have those mechanisms to control and keep them from the other side of the fence. This is why I lost a good friend years ago, because she is incredibly skilled and talented in her ability to sense and perceive, but she didn't have the controls, and she actually began to lose more of her ability to control while she was having these altered states, and that was it. She lost it, and she went over the fence. And so that's a hard place to be in, because you have to be very self-aware, and you have to be very cautious and careful with what you're dealing with. And most people who go into this work, they don't do enough research or enough background study to understand what they're going to encounter. I always want to know what I'm going to deal with, because I don't want to walk into surprises. I prefer, if I'm going to walk into a surprise, let it be a good surprise. I would rather be a good surprise. I don't want bad surprises. So I want to know what I'm dealing with. So I try to do as much prep before anything so that I know what I'm going to be dealing with. Most people who want to do this work, they just start meditating and they start summoning, all of the ends of the earth and the world. They start playing with Ouija boards because they want to have an experience. They want to remember what they truly are beneath the surface. They want to be reminded that this reality is not it. Unfortunately, they're coming from a place of ignorance, honestly, a place of ignorance, because they're not aware of what they're getting into. And then you have people who suddenly stumble into this, and all of a sudden shit goes off the handles. They start having experiences they don't understand. They don't have experiences that they can control. And then you start having people who are way on the fringe and out there. This is where you get into the QAnon territory. This is when you get into those types of spaces where people are no longer trying to have any kind of control, and they're literally going with every jerk that comes along in their energy shift. And that's not going to help them. That's not going to allow them to gain what they need to gain from what they're desiring. So when you ask me, like, are you too emotional? I'm like, well, I'm emotional. I experience emotion, but I don't allow my emotion to dictate or to run every aspect of my life, but I allow my emotion to exist. And if my emotion if I need to have a moment of expression, I'm going to have it. I'm going to have that moment of expression. So if, for example, with having Roxy go through all of this, I had like too many breakdowns in the last 2 weeks, because it has been a journey. It has been a roller coaster, and it has been very difficult. And not only that, but it's been triggering for me on a personal level, because we're around the 30-year anniversary of when my mother actually went through this. And so I had to see my mother go from a perfectly solid person to being this person that I did not recognize, who scared the hell out of me, and who also I just was heartbroken to experience her in this way. And so we're around that anniversary, and then my mother was the same age as Roxy now when this happened. So this is all a cyclical pattern that has shown back up in my life. And in my life right now, at the time that this happened for me, Roxy has a daughter, and her daughter was the same age as around the same age as I was when I went through this. So I'm literally seeing this all play out in the way that I'm like, wow, like I literally went through this myself, and it was so difficult. So what I've been able to do, and this is karma, this is what you call karma, karma. This is when you resolve a karma. Because if you have an experience that affects you drastically and tremendously, which it did for me when I saw my mother go through this process, it was a experience that completely transformed me for the rest of my life. And it left me in a state of disempowerment. I had no power because I didn't know. I didn't understand. And so what I've been able to do for Roxy and for her daughter is I've been able to give them tools and give them information that may be helping her to recover. I don't know if this will be helpful to her or not, or they're going to use this, but I've been able to offer information to give them a path out of this that can be different from what happened for me. I've been able to give her daughter advice. And I know what she's going through because I went through it. I can talk to her the way she's feeling. I can connect with her on that level and say, your mom is not fully aware of everything, and some of what she's experiencing is not her. It's the situation. I'm able to give her something and empower her in a way that I was never able to have for myself. And so here I am resolving a karma. This is a karmic resolution for me to have to go through this again, but in the opposite side of it, and being able to help someone to shift the narrative, because I don't want the narrative to repeat itself. The cycle cannot repeat itself. And I went through all of that. And if I went through all of that just to give this little girl a chance to have a different narrative than I did, so fucking be it, because I'm going to use it then. And so I've been able to give her that information and that knowledge, and she gets it and she understands it and she feels empowered again. It may not be something she's still enjoying going through, watching her mom recover and having to go through all these cognitive dysfunctions, but she is in an empowered state now. And so she may not have to experience the level of trauma that I had to go through, being left in the dark, being left out of the grown-ups stuff going on. And the kids these days being born, they're incredibly intelligent, they're incredibly adept, and they are able to do things that I could not even fathom doing at their age. So we have to give them credit. And so I've been able to do something in a different way than what I went through myself. And for me, this has been like a full circle moment to have this. 1810's a question. Why would a soul exist in maybe two forms at the same time? Is that soul's wish to learn more, or does it just happen? Why would a apple tree choose to have more than one apple? Why would it choose to bear more than one apple as a fruit on the same tree? Because sky's the limit. Because it is summoned into the expansion of producing these other forms of itself. And so it is doing what is natural for it, just like our soul is doing what is natural for it as well. Yeah, Cassie's like the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls are a good read too. Yeah, I have all of that stuff. I literally have every single thing you're talking about. I have a habit of buying a crap load of books, and it may take me a while to get to them, but I will get to them. I'm going to get to them. So I have a lot of stuff that I still am reading. But when I dive into a new piece of information or something new that I'm studying, I really dig in and I try to like really dissect stuff because I want to understand things. I want to understand as much as I can. Gloria's my cousin. Gloria Lopez. What are your thoughts on the times of Egyptians? Was the group more advanced in higher knowledge? So with the Egyptians, it just depends because there have been different ages for the Egyptians, and before the Egyptians, there were two other groups as well. So it just depends on like the time frame and so forth. Think of it this way: and this is something that I struggle with. This is actually something that I personally was struggling with. And I just put out I wrote a letter, and it was a letter that Aja wrote. So I was summoned one day. I was watching, TV, and I was summoned to get up and to get a piece of paper and a pen and write what I needed to write. So I was like, okay. So I sat there and I wrote pages and pages and hours to, and what was said in that paper, and you can see it, it's online, it's public now. It's on medium.com on my articles. You can get there through my website. It's called The Letter of Resolution. And so what I was told by Aja was that not all humans are the same. And there's a lot of inequality with the level of awareness, understanding, and the ability to integrate or to receive wisdom, knowledge, teachings, awareness, concepts. There's a lot of inequalities there. And it's not because this is a punishment for people. This is just simply the way it is. A bird does not have the same level and complex thinking pattern as like a lion. A lion may not have the same level of complex thinking pattern as like an octopus. We may not have the same level of, some of us don't have the same level or complex patterns of awareness as each other. We're not all the same. You have people, and 2020 has been a perfect example of this, because you have people who are educated, went to college, and are dumb as shit. And then you have people who are not educated, who make a hell of a lot more sense and can understand things fairly easily and quickly than the people who went and got their PhDs. Like we've seen this, because just because you have a diploma or just because you have a PhD doesn't mean that you are better than anybody else. It just means that you went through a process of being educated in a system that has granted you this award or this credential. That does not prove that you are any wiser than anyone else, because many times experience is what teaches us. Experience is what makes us wise. So we know now from experience that we're not all the same, that we're all different. That doesn't mean that we don't all deserve the same things or we don't all have the same opportunities. It just means that we're not all the same. I am a gay man. I'm 6'1" in height. I'm like 165 pounds. And so I am not the same as a person who's maybe like 5'5" or 5'4", and they're like 250 pounds, right? We're just different, right? So our abilities are going to be different. That's the same for the mental process as well. There are some people who their mental process, their understanding and comprehension level is unique to them. And not all people are prepared or ready or anointed to understand some of the most complex teachings and the understanding of the wisest teachers of our past. Like some of us just are not there and won't be there. And so that's okay. It doesn't, not everyone has to be on the same level. You've got people walking around talking about they're woke, but the moment that you do something they don't like, they're going to like attack you. That's not being wokeful. That's like being, you obviously don't have any control of your mechanisms or your ability. And if you're going to do something, you need to be aware and be intentional about it. And every time you see me go off on someone, it's intentional. I'm not just like letting go. Like I'm being intentionally aggressive in the way I'm expressing myself in a passionate and constructed way. So it's not just me going off a handle. It's just so y'all know when y'all encounter that on some of the posts. But and I don't do that as often as I feel I do. But anyways, so not all people are designed or able to comprehend and experience everything that is available to us from a spiritual perspective, from an informational perspective. And so what Aja told me was that throughout history, there have been the sages, there have been the wise men, there have been the priestly or priestess sects, people who were specifically trained or were anointed enough. And when I say anointed, it doesn't mean anointed as worthy, but anointed means prepared for this engagement of divinity. There were people who either by by the energy of their lives, by how they were born, where they were born, whatever. There were people who were anointed and were prepared for the ability to understand the information. And most of the people in history were illiterate. They could not read for themselves. They could only hear what was being spoken to them. Not all people could afford books. Not all people could even understand what was in a book. So most people did not have that ability, but you had a sect of people who did. You had a small percentage of people who could. And so there were these priestly castes that were produced and created specifically to understand and to be aware and to filter that down to those in a way they can accept, in the way that they can understand. The problem that happened, and what Aja told me, is that over time, these priestly sects and these groupings of wise men were corrupted by those who were not anointed, were corrupted because circumstances required for people to step into those roles who were not prepared for them. And so there has been a gradual, loss of integrity of those people, those groups that are designed to understand the information. Over time, if you get a bunch of people who have never driven a vehicle, and let's say you have, 5 people on this side who've never driven a vehicle, you got 5 people on this side who are mechanics, and then you've got like 1 person or 2 persons in the middle who they know how to drive a vehicle, but they're not mechanics. The mechanics understand. They get it. They understand it. If you lose a mechanic or you lose a few mechanics and you replace them with just the drivers will still be able to use that tool, use that vehicle to achieve their goal and to get to where they need to get to. But when it comes down to breaking apart and understanding and repairing or keeping that vehicle in integrity so that it's working the way it's supposed to, they're not going to be able to do that because they've lost those people who were anointed in those forms of understanding. They lost those groupings of people. And that happened. People died. There were catastrophes. There were wars. People were lost. So you replace a lot of these anointed folk with people who can just use the information, but they don't understand it and they can't really break it down. And then you put those people in charge of teaching or helping those who have no idea how to use a vehicle. At that point, that's a disaster waiting to happen. This is what has occurred with the Jewish faith and religion. This is what has occurred with the Christian faith and religion. This is what has occurred with the Muslim faith and religion. This is what has occurred with every single religion and every single faith. People who were not meant to understand or make sense of stuff ended up getting a hold of it, became in control of it, and then they decided to call the shots. They had the ability to call the shots. And what do you know? You have a whole group of people who will open a Bible and they will read it and they will take it for word of mouth. They will not realize that that is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's been changed several times along the way, and people have taken to artistic creation and changing some of it to fit their own narrative because they wanted to. Mary Magdalene, the idea of Mary Magdalene was not a whore. She was not a whore or prostitute until I think it was the 5th century, just because there was a man who did not care for women and did not like them and thought that women they could corrupt men. And so they wrote a lot of inspiring doctrine that shifted the perspective and the trajectory of some of the beliefs of the current church. And so all of a sudden, for the rest of the next 1,500 years, 2,000 years, she's a whore because of one person. Because that person was not anointed and was not meant to use this information so that's why information can be very powerful. It can be a weapon. It can also be a tool. And most people use knowledge. Most people use things as weapons because they are trying to use it as a form of manipulation and control to prevent themselves from being harmed and to gain control over their ability to be comfortable and to be happy. And so that's why most people, you cannot trust everyone with information or with resources, etc., because they may not use it in the way that it's intended to. And so Aja told me that the priestly sect died off, and a lot of the wisdom from those ancient writings and texts were lost through all of that watering down of the anointed ones within the groups. And so now you have the blind leading the blind, essentially, in retrospect. So that's essentially what's happened there. And that's why that's how I always told. And I didn't understand that. And I was like, no, I believe that because personally I'm like, no, everybody should have the same opportunities. Everybody should be able to use this. Everybody should have access to all this stuff. Everybody should. And what I've been told is the opposite. Like, not everybody is meant to use this. Not everybody can use it. Not everybody is designed that way. And I've struggled with that because I don't agree with that with Aja. But at the same time, I have reverence for my higher self. And so it's like one of those things like, oh, okay. And shortly thereafter, this is how God talks to you, right? After I wrote that down and I spent, then the next day I was listening to an Audible book about the 1st century CE. And that is exactly what was the chapter. The chapter was about a priest in that period or in that time who believed that not everyone was meant to understand the information. And there's been a lot. And so it literally was like exactly what I was told, but coming from someone from like back in the day. So I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting coincidence. And then I was like, okay. And then the same day, later on that evening, I was reading I thought, okay, well, I finished that section in my Audible book, and then I decided to read this book, which is Celsus. This is an individual who lived, I think in the 2nd century CE. And he is saying the exact same thing from the opposite side of that because one was coming from a Jewish perspective, and then this one was coming from a Greek perspective where they're more pagans. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm hearing this from like all sides. This is what I mean when I say you're in sync. I am summoned. I showed up. I put down on paper what I was supposed to, and then the universe said, good job, and then showed me that it is what it is, and you did what you were supposed to, and then I got it again. So all these things showed up to affirm what I was able to do. And that's what happens when you are headed in a path that you are meant to go down. You will have a crap load of affirmations, and it's kind of hard to ignore them. They're going to be all over the damn place. But if you are headed down a path that does not serve you, you may still get some synchronicities, because when you believe in something strongly, you're going to get enough evidence to support your belief, because that's what you're summoning. You're summoning it to exist in this reality. But at some point, there's only so much that can remain in integrity before it starts to butt up and slam against the actual reality. And so you have people who believe in an altered reality, and their belief and it's being fueled, and they're getting information that is making them feel like they're right. But when it slams into the grander reality, the contradictions are overwhelming. At that point, you have to stop and say, okay, wait a minute. Where am I in all this? Because I'm getting mixed signals. Am I getting affirmations for my beliefs, which are few and far between? And it all seems perfectly, like everything is perfect in what I believe? Or am I getting affirmations which are affirming the opposite of what I believe? And there's enough of them happening everywhere. Even if they aren't all connected, it's like overwhelmingly obvious that this is what the universe is actually telling me, and not what I'm wanting to hear. Because if you choose to hear what you want to hear, you will hear it. So that's why I'm very careful when I get synchronicities or affirmations. You get one, or you get something that's like a synchronicity. You're like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's weird. But when you start to get a crap load of them, at that point, that's when you need to listen to that, because that's the matrix. That's the reality. That's what you're being guided by. And that one thing may not actually be something that you're being guided by. You may have produced that and manifested that affirmation and that synchronicity. So there's subtle differences, but they're big differences. They make a lot of they're big in the change. So, all right, guys, I'm like 20 minutes past my time. I got to go make dinner. So I got to go and make dinner. Let me make a prank cycle. And he's my brother the other day. Just running through here really quickly before So all these, just a lot of personal questions. Yeah, that's it. Okay, we'll end there. So, all right, guys, I love you all. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will be back next Wednesday for our next study group